And I think it's an important thing when you're trying to build platforms is realizing that the platforms themselves have these incentives at heart.
You're so unique in the sense that not a lot of people are great at entrepreneurship, great at content, and great at the very specific, like hyper niche, like gardening.
You actually have to be better at creating than you have to be at the hobby. You don't have to be that good at the hobby. You actually have to be world class at the creating part of it.
How do you explain what you do? Like you meet somebody randomly off the street, or you have like a cousin that you haven't spoken to in a really long time, and they're like, "Yo, Kevin, like what the heck do you do, man?" You know?
Yeah. I've changed it over the years because I think when you're like starting out and striving, you want to make yourself feel really good and important. So you say, "Oh, I'm building this company, doing this and that," and you try to hype it up. And these days I just say I teach people how to garden on the internet. It's the quickest way I can say it. And then I if they're curious, they'll ask more. If not, they don't. Or sometimes I'll just say I'm a gardener and leave it at that if I don't feel like talking about it. But yeah, I mean, the simplest way I could put it, or I run a gardening company these days is the way that I like to phrase it.
Yeah, isn't like the follow-up question, especially from like family, like, okay, well, that's nice, but like, how the heck do you make money? Like, how do you make money
Yeah,
from
well,
gardening?
fam these days, like
They kind of
family
get it.
gets it now,
Yeah.
because they all see me out there doing whatever I'm doing, so they get it. But I'd say for every kind of creator, it takes a while before they really get it, and they have
Mhm.
to see some like kind of traditional external symbols before they're like, oh, he's like actually legit.
Yeah.
But yeah, they get it these days.
Well, I feel like, I mean, you have a huge following and you're still, like reaching a ton of people on a weekly basis. But like my mom watches your videos, I watch your videos. Like when I followed you for the very first time, I was like, "Yeah, this is interesting." Like, I never seen somebody like on the younger side of the spectrum do gardening videos in like the YouTube-esque style. Like most of the videos that I had seen when I first started getting into like gardening were like older ladies, in their backyard with like a really shitty iPhone or, like horrible audio quality. It's like an hour-long video for just talking about like one small thing, whereas like yours are like optimized perfectly. And then you have like obviously the setup and everything, which makes it really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's how it started for me was trying to take some of that information and turn it into something a little bit more consumable
Yeah.
because I found those hard to watch and listen to. So, I kinda just made stuff. I was like, "Well, I would watch this, I guess." So, there you go. And it started out with a blog and then it went to YouTube, but same principle everywhere.
Yeah. And I know you've kind of shared your story in terms of like how you got to where you are today, but if we could just do like a quick overview of like, you had these internships in college or whatever, your first job, and then how did you end up, gardening and being like this kind of YouTube media star, full time? I think it's pretty
Yeah,
fascinating.
so yeah, I'll give, like, the quick kind of year by year, if that helps, is I think I started Epic Gardening in 2013. It was just a hobby blog, and I'd come out of college, and I'd paid for my accounting degree with online poker. I was playing online poker for a living,
Nice.
um, and I didn't wanna do that forever, so I ended up quitting that and tried to figure out what to do. So I was building websites for, local customers, local clients, local businesses. So I started the gardening blog because I was doing that as a hobby at the time, as a kind of like a digital calling card, like, "Hey, look, I can build a website and this here's one that I have." And as I got into marketing and search traffic and all that kind of stuff, SEO, I was using the gardening blog as proof I could also do that. Like, "Hey, look, my blog gets traffic. I could probably get you traffic." At the same time, I started to get curious about, okay, well, you can like blogs can earn money and you can put some ads on there and the ads can earn money. And so I kind of got enamored with that idea and explored that a little bit more. And that led me down the path of growing the blog, which then led me down the path of, okay, well, you should have different media formats. So then I got on YouTube
Mm.
and then I started the podcast and all the different social channels. And then in 2019, after I was making a pretty good living at that point, just off the media side, the content side, I started offering products to the audience because, brands will come to you with brand deals or whatever, and they'll say, "Hey, we want you to promote this." And eventually I was like, I didn't do many of them in the first place. I was like, I don't get why I would give my audience to a brand if I could just be the brand.
Yeah.
So I started selling products to the audience in 2019, which went really well and was
It
very
was like the
fortuitous.
first, like what was the physical products, right? So like what was the
Yeah,
product?
physical products. Yeah. So the first product, it was a product I'd been sent as a sample, and I just had it going in my garden. It was a raised bed,
Mhm.
which is just a way of planting, right? As kind of wavy corrugated metal raised bed. And so I kept emailing the company and said, hey, can I sell these? Can I sell these? They finally said yes. So 2019 took about half the money I had, put it into a container of those beds, slapped the Shopify store up, and off to the races. I knew they'd sell. I didn't know they'd sell in like pre-sale in like 4 or 5 days. And so I was kind of off to the races with that and getting into the world of e-com, which I did not know anything about, like totally clueless, just running and gunning it. But then setting all that up before 2020 was very lucky because obviously with the pandemic, all like home-based hobbies just took off like a rocket. And so that's kind of the shortest way I could summarize kind of what happened when Epic was growing.
Interesting. And then I remember that like time period quickly because I think that's when I started getting to gardening, like 2019, 2020.
Mhm.
You already had your YouTube and everything by then.
Yeah,
Uh,
YouTube was probably at 180K in on early March 2020 when the lockdown happened.
do you remember how much it grew over the span of like 2 or 3 years or like over COVID?
Yeah, well, yeah. So literally the day after the lockdown, I gained 15,000 subs.
Wow.
So over 10% of the whole channel's growth in a day, right? And so, and that was happening across the blog, across all the social channels as well.
Yeah.
And so I remember messaging my editor because up until 2019, I was doing YouTube, but I was kind of doing all the platforms and I wasn't hyper focused, you know?
Mhm.
All the platforms were earning some revenue. So I was like, okay, I'll be this multimedia thing. And I messaged my editor. I said, we're going to Monday, Wednesday, Fridays for the rest of the whole year, like without fail, 12 p.m. release, kind of like a standard schedule. And that worked really well. So I think we hit 1 million on YouTube before the end of the year, or maybe
Yeah.
just after the end of that one year, And then all the other channels also grew. So it was crazy. I remember saying to myself at the time, like, you better enjoy this while it lasts, because this is going to be the fastest you'll ever, this is going to be the most sort of promotion you're ever going to get. And that turns out to be like maybe true, maybe not, but it was a fun time.
Yeah, maybe true, maybe not because yes, everybody was at home bored and they're like looking for things to do. And so obviously you were doing that time. But then after you reach a certain point, it's like a network effect, right? Once you hit like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, then YouTube is just recommending you a ton to other people. And you have, an audience on other platforms like IG, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. So you can kind of push people around to sub. Um, so you said you kind of went all in on YouTube. Were you, like, optimizing for YouTube and then just cutting videos for Shorts, TikTok, et cetera? Because I think you have a pretty big TikTok audience too, right?
Yeah, TikTok's at 3.2 or 3.3 mil now. I think the days of being able to grow quick on TikTok obviously are not here anymore.
Yeah.
But so I don't think I could like replicate that today. But there's always like time and place, right? Like TikTok in 2019, 2020 was kind of like a magical place. And these days it's kind of TikTok shop and a bunch of random stuff. Still good, but not the same magic. No, so I wasn't cutting down from YouTube to short form, because I think what I discovered in 2019 when I got on TikTok is TikTok was basically the stories concept on steroids, right? Like it was like
Mhm.
Vine plus or Stories plus, I guess is the best way to put it. And so I was treating it initially as a place to like throw IG stories or story-esque content, and see what it did. And then I realized like, no, like the real players here are cutting that like it's a real video. It's funny to say that now in 2019. Obviously, short form is such a science these days, a science and an art. But back then, I was making specific TikToks and kind of clipping them together with Premiere or whatever editing program I was using. And then I took that and brought that over to the other platforms once they all copied TikTok. So going to Facebook Reels, IG Reels, and YouTube Shorts, that all then blew up those channels. And I think it's an important thing when you're trying to build platforms, is realizing that the platforms themselves have these incentives at heart. And so, the second IG launches Reels, you probably should just spam Reels because
Yeah.
they need it to
For
work, right?
distribution. Exactly.
Yeah, so same with YouTube. And for YouTube was interesting because it was not as quick of a ramp. It took like 3 months, I would say, for stuff that I was ripping from TikTok that I knew just factually did well on TikTok, to hit on YouTube. It took like 3 months. Like if you look at the graph, it'll be like a flat line and then a straight up.
Mm.
And I didn't get it, and I still don't really get it, but YouTube was just less of a responsive algorithm, at least back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was doing custom content for Shorts.
Are you playing around with, like, LinkedIn Video now?
I haven't, and I think it's a mistake. I just haven't. Maybe you can give me some pointers, because that plus gardening, I don't know that it makes sense, but I could just be wrong.
I think you can do like probably not spam a ton of your IG reels or other stuff that you're putting up on YouTube, but maybe like some behind the scenes stuff that you've done. Because then you do like a lot of like business content and like here are my thoughts on personal branding and all that stuff. But you're so unique in the sense that not a lot of people, are great at entrepreneurship, great at content, and great at the very specific like hyper niche like gardening. And so
Mm,
being able to show like that third bucket of your personality and what you do on a daily basis will make you like stand out a ton. And then you supplement him with like all the other type of content that you're already doing. I think that'd be cool.
yeah, yeah, that could be interesting. Do a little like business X gardening.
Or like there's that
That.
video that went hyper viral for you where it was like the knee thing where you
Oh
like
yeah.
bend down with the knee. Like post that video and then in the copy you can do here's how we thought of it, here's why we think it worked, here are the results. And
Hmm.
then LinkedIn I think would love that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll give that a try in the next day or two.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so we kind of covered how you got here. We didn't really talk about what products do you have today and how is the business structured?
Yeah, yeah. So a couple years after I started selling product in 2021, the very tail end, I raised a Series A, which allowed us to have enough capital to make some acquisitions. So we acquired a couple companies, bought a blog to boost our traffic.
Nice.
We bought a small seed starting tray company. So when you start seeds, you usually put them in something and then you transplant from that thing to the garden. We bought that thing um, and expanded that product line to about 15 different SKUs now. And then the big acquisition, which was the tail end of 2022, was a seed company. So we purchased a seed company based out of Denver called Botanical Interests. And that almost doubled the size of the company because it's seed and it's in wholesale and it's just a really established brand. And so now it's sort of a brand under Epic, but we run it brand wise completely on its own because it's a great brand. We don't want to disrupt the brand in any way. But yeah, now we've got quite a few different lines of products and we still have those raised beds as well.
Yeah. Why buy versus like build from scratch? Is it just because like, seeds and all this like physical products is it's kind of a headache to do? And I guess building it from scratch, you kind of have to like model everything out and figure out
Yeah,
where you
I
get your
mean,
supplier from.
we are doing both. So with take the seed trays. The seed trays was just functionally the best seed tray I'd ever seen. And
Those the ones that you
not
sent me. They're
it
like
probably
kind of
was.
like
Yeah.
long ones, black, and they have a little bubble top, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
And there's like holes in the bottom, right?
Yep, exactly. I just
Yeah.
used them yesterday.
Exactly. Nice. You liking them?
Yeah, I like them.
Okay, cool. Well, so yeah, I mean, when I saw that, the way that that worked at the start is a friend of mine invented them. And so he brought them down and I was like, man, these are the best trays I've ever seen. Like for sure. I just kind of knew it. And so I started to tease them in front of the audience, which is sort of free product validation, right? Especially when people are saying like, please send me the link so I can buy it. Then you really
Mhm.
know you have something.
Yeah.
And so we started to sell them on the store with just like a profit split setup. And they did really well. Like they sold out in 20, 30 seconds every time we had a batch of inventory. And
Awesome.
so I was like, okay, cool. And so in that case, it was like, why build it? He already has it. I just pitched him on, can I purchase the assets from you and hire you basically?
Mm,
And his name's Diego. He still works with us and he's fantastic. So in some situations, it's just illogical to build if it's right in front of you. Then there are situations like the gardening industry is a very old industry.
yep.
And there's a lot of physical stuff in this industry. Like the biggest categories in the industry are live plants, like fruit trees and vegetables and flowers, seeds, and then like soils and fertilizers, which are very bulky and heavy, right? And to build any of those from scratch, you would need to start a nursery and grow it out, and you'd have to actually grow through many seasons to scale up production.
Mm,
You'd have to start a seed company with distribution. You'd have to probably spend 3 to 5 years building out like a distribution network,
yeah.
Plus, there's a ton of regulation in seed. And so certain things like the entry cost is actually really high. And if you have the capital, it would make more sense to just acquire a brand from founders who were ready to retire, which is what we did.
This is I don't know how to kind of word the question, but again, you're kind of younger. When I think of gardening, I don't think of like a young dude, like selling seeds and all that. Do you ever get like shit from other people in the industry of like this young dude coming in here trying to like even when you first started, that was like 10 years ago. Like you're
Yeah.
probably in your early 20s then. Did you ever get shit from other, I don't know, people that were like leaders in the gardening space or anything like that?
I'm sure it's happened. I think I've like heard little whiffs of it here and there.
Mm,
I try not to seek that stuff out, but
yeah,
I would say, a lot of the folks that we work with are those people, and I think they enjoy a different voice. Um,
that's cool.
I think gardener like the thing about the gardening industry is so interesting is like by and large, everyone's pretty transparent and pretty friendly.
Yeah.
I would say maybe the creator space is the example to the
More pushy.
contrary of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the gardening creator space is a little bit less so, but the actual gardening industry itself is pretty friendly. Like the seed industry, everyone kind of knows everyone's margins. Like it's very transparent. And I think a lot of people, when you're in gardening, like you're not really sad that someone's bringing more people into the passion.
Yeah.
So you might not appreciate the approach, but you could at least can't deny the effectiveness. So I don't think we get too much of it.
Because at the end of the day, you're growing the pie for everybody, and you're making, yeah, if you say you're getting more people into gardening, which is great for the entire space as a whole.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, which brings more people, let's say, into an independent nursery that maybe they
exactly.
don't like the way I make the videos. Not saying that's true, but let's just
Yeah,
imagine still more people are probably coming into the nursery, right? So they're
that's
still
true.
happy.
How does the business run today? Like, are you able to share any like numbers or like percentage wise how everything is split in terms of revenue that you make?
Yeah, I mean, these days I try not to share direct numbers just because there's
It's cool.
there's almost no benefit. But
Yeah.
we're a multi eight-figure business now,
Mm.
and we're about 60 people plus our
That's a
warehouse
big
staff.
team.
Yeah, it's a big team. A seed company, it's big. I mean, we need everyone at the company, and we take raw seed and we bring it through an entire like testing germination process all the way through packaging and shipping, right? So
Yeah.
you need a lot of talented people to do that, and the machinery is very specific. So you need people who know the machines. Um, so yeah, and then as far as like structure, eventually I did decide to hire a president to help run day-to-day operations, who's killer. Because it got to a point where I was like, I'm out of my depth as far as the operations. When you're
Yeah.
managing logistics of dozens of containers a year, like all that kind of stuff, it was no longer what I was good at. And so yeah,
At,
we've got
at
a
what point did
leadership
you
team.
feel? At what point did you feel like it got? Was it like 30 people, a dozen people, or was it at maybe a revenue number or product in terms of products? What point did you feel like kind of got out of your
I
scope?
mean, I would say, to be honest, like I've felt out of my scope most of the time. Like when we raised the Series A, it was me and four contractors. It was
Wow.
my writer, my editor, my gardening assistant, and my actual assistant. And it was just the four of us kind of running and gunning it. And even then, I was overburdened by what was kind of coming down the pipe. But then, yeah, well, after we went from, inside of a year, we went from that team to 80, maybe
Wow.
90. And so my mind basically exploded. And so we were, and, I had a interim COO at the time who was helping with a lot of the scaling and acquisitions, who was awesome. Um, but he was from the investor side. So it's not like he had a ton of operational experience either at the levels that we were at. And I didn't either. Right. And so at that point, it was like we were doing the best we could, kind of building the plane as it crashed or whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
And
Has it crashed?
at some point, I was like, you know what? Like, I finally kind of like mentally gave up and admitted. I was like, okay, we need to get people who know what they're doing here. And that was kind of the impetus for really building out the leadership team.
Yeah, I mean, that's wild because even from a hiring perspective, I used to work on a recruiting team. So even hiring 50, 60 people is a headache on its own because you have to interview thousands of people or like screen thousands of people. So I can't even imagine doing all
Yeah.
that plus running the company day to day.
Yeah, it's so crazy because when I look back at 2022, the year after the raise versus 2021, my day to day just dramatically shifted. There's so many calls I had to be on, and I kept feeling pulled away from kind of the essentials,
Yeah.
even though, if you're hiring, that is the essentials. Like new essentials came to be, and I was unfamiliar with like what those days were supposed to look like.
Yeah. Now that you have like an established business, established team, and you're somewhat like, you're super tech savvy and all that. So I'm sure you understand like what's going on with AI. How do you see, and Caleb and I were kind of talking about this before the call, like what are businesses or just things that are like AI will likely not be able to solve entirely, and things with
Mhm.
your like with your hands or things that you build or things that are in the real world are probably Um, Not like foolproof, but more sound and secure than tech and software and all that. But how are you thinking about like implementing AI into your business, or are you even thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we use it a good amount already. We don't use it in our written content counterintuitively.
Interesting.
I have, the person that I hired when we actually purchased his blog. He runs all of our search now, our editorial content, and he's kept it completely AI free, which you would think would be the first thing to go because it's written, right? LLMs are really good at that. But no, we keep that pretty clean because we feel that the gardening knowledge from actual human beings out in the real world is more important than what AI can generate there. But what I will say is like I have a model trained on the way I write that we use to draft up like the skeleton of, let's say, an email copy or something like that, and then we'll go through it and redo it. So it's really just like a rough first draft. We'll
Like
use it
save you
as.
pass.
Yeah, it saves me a pass, and then I'll also use it as like narrative structure skeletons for, let's say, a short form script or something like that.
Mhm.
Or I'll use it as gut checks against like different ways of structuring content. So like, is there a different way I could structure this? Or a different title combination I could use? Or if I can't crack, let's say, a YouTube title, I might say, I'm having trouble with this title. It needs to be, and I'll give it the parameters like under 55 characters, one emoji, power word, whatever that might be. And sometimes, not all the time, it'll crack it for me. I'm like, "Ah, I can't believe I didn't think of that formulation of the title. And then well, how else are we using it? Um, oh,
Like,
the big
like,
thing we're
is there any
the
like?
big thing we're
Go ahead.
working on is think about what we've built, right? We have thousands of articles, videos, etc., and it's all done by real gardeners. And so what we're trying to do now is create basically like an epic knowledge base that can be pulled from and queried against any like type of query someone might have. So if they're on our blog, they can just say like, "Can I actually grow this plant in zone 9B or something?" And it'll tell them. Or if they're on the store, let's say, they might say like, "Hey, I have 10 square feet. What's the best product to buy? And then what do I plant in it?" We're trying to get to that level where you can answer all that with real information, not like hallucinated stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is like you can almost build like your own GPT wrapper on like highly trained on gardening and everything that you know,
Mhm.
all your
Yeah.
YouTube videos and everything. Because, like, even me, I have a tiny little garden in the backyard, and, like, I'm always, like, Googling, like, "All right, what the heck to garden in February?" Or, like, "This is the temperature that I have in the backyard, like, what can I garden in this specific space that gets, like, 40% sunlight?" And I end up spending, like, more
Mhm.
time digging through, Google and articles that end up trying to sell me something versus if I had
Mhm.
just one tool that I could use and spat out an answer that was, somewhat accurate and less biased.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the idea, especially because gardening's such a weird, uh, niche or category because there's so many permutations of how the answer could express for the same
Yeah,
question. So, like, "Can I grow tomatoes?" Well, it's like, "Okay, where do you live? What time of year is it? What kind of space are you in? What do you like to eat?" Like, there's too many variables against that, and that's why I think people find it so confusing. It's not like, "What saw do I need to cut a 2 by 4?"
exactly.
There is usually just an answer to that.
Well, I mean, I guess they could pick up on your geolocation and, the date and time and all that, which would help a lot, make it specific to the user. I should have asked this at the beginning, but how did you even get into gardening? Did you like doing this as a kid? Somebody in your family?
No. No, I mean, I never I think my grandfather had, like, a small garden as a kid, but I never really connected to it.
Cared? Yeah,
But I was very much into, like, nature and science as a kid. I was, like, collecting rocks and collecting bugs and coins and all that kinda stuff. But, I got into it in my early 20s with my brother. I had come out of college playing poker, like I was telling you,
mhm,
and when I quit, I started playing video games instead of poker because I didn't know what else to do. I had some money, and I was like, "Ah, I'll just play some games and enjoy life or whatever." But I started playing, like, way too much, just way
video
too
game.
many video games.
What games were you playing back then?
I was on back then, it would have been when StarCraft 2 came out.
Oh my god, that
So,
was my jam.
I was on my StarCraft 2 grind. I was terrible at it. I didn't ever get that good. Um, that was when Minecraft came out.
Nice.
So I'd play Minecraft with friends, and I think at some point League of Legends dropped, and I was on League of Legends for a while, but it was just too much. I was like, "I'm going nowhere doing this. I might as well have kept playing poker." It was like a video game I actually made money on this. I'm not even making money, right?
Exactly.
So my brother came home from college. He's younger, and we decided to garden that summer. And I just got really hooked by it. I was growing cucumbers hydroponically. The science of it combined with the nature of it, I just really got intrigued. And somehow that coalesced with like making the websites at the same time. So I started the blog, and it just thankfully was a side project that I never kind of fully dropped until 2016 when I went full time on it. So I'm happy I didn't like forget to register the domain or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And like today, can you walk me through like your process for, end to end in terms of you think of a new product or a new seed or new whatever it is that you're going to sell? How do you go ahead and build the product and then also think about your distribution strategy? Like which one comes first? Do you think of like, okay, how am I going to market this or how am I going to word it? How am I going to position it compared to the different SKUs that we have?
Yeah. So okay, so take like our new seed line that we just dropped, which would be the Epic Gardening seed line,
Hmm.
which is kind of counterintuitive because we have a seed brand that has 750 varieties. So like why do another? In that case, it's because that brand and many seed brands with a lot of variety, it typically caters to a gardener who like knows what they're doing already. Because they know not only do they want to grow a marigold, but they want to grow the French marigold, you know, and a beginner doesn't even know maybe even what a marigold is. And so what we decided is we need a slimmed down line with less choice. And we'd like to do it under the Epic brand because that might allow it to go to new channels that our existing seed brand can't go to. So let's say if we wanted to go to a big box store, which would allow for more access to our brand and maybe at a better price point,
Yep.
we can't do it with our existing seed brand. So we decided to have a different brand name for that. And then, as far as like the positioning of the product itself, we're like, well, let's give less choice, but let's make those choices really, really good no matter what. So they can just pick it straight up off and they know it's going to work. So instead of giving, 17, 20 different tomatoes, we gave three. And instead of, two different squash or like 20 different squash, we give one, right? This
Yeah.
is the
It
squash,
is
you
it is
know?
pretty overwhelming when I go to like Home Depot and I want to buy like some seeds and there's like
Yeah.
so many different tomatoes and me as like a novice, I'm like, okay, just tell me what the best one is and that like is easiest to grow for me as a
That's all I
newbie,
need. Yeah. Especially when you start, like what I needed when I started was something like that. It's just like, this is the cucumber to grow and this is the way to grow it. And then just like worry about getting into the details of it for 3, 4 years from now when you're obsessed, you know? But at the start, don't. So anyways, that was the genesis of the line. Then you go through, the artwork, there's the packaging, like all that kind of stuff. And then as far as like launching it, I'm usually a fan of sort of like integrating it in a non-flashy way, usually. So what I'll do is we'll start to throw it in little short form pieces and tease it, and then eventually when there is a big launch day, we don't usually synchronize everything, but email and SMS will drop. Maybe there's a couple emails. We'll throw it in all of our communities, and then in this case, I did put out like a dedicated YouTube video about it, saying like we just launched a new seed line, and that was our way of kind of getting the word out. And then we see, does it have legs or does it not have legs? And if it does, you work it into more things. If it doesn't, then you don't spam bad product on a customer or an audience, right? And that's the way. And then you have your standard acquisition channels like paid and stuff, and you spin those.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. So what is your own distribution strategy look like? How, like what's your total reach? Let's say for a really good product that you want to push super hard. Like I don't even know how many followers you have across everything that you would push it. And then
Mhm.
if it does well there, then what's your paid acquisition strategy? Do you go to IG, Facebook, et cetera? Or like what's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we basically they operate semi-independently. So, our paid team will be cooking ideas and trying to make it work in paid regardless of what we do in organic.
Nice.
But if I for some reason have a piece on organic that does do well, we might rip it direct and try to run it as an ad, or we might just, recut it or slice it in some way and try to run it as an ad. But we're trying to make the product line work on both channels out the gate. And primarily, like the organic channels is to let someone know it exists. It's not usually for a direct convert because then you turn your organic into sales too often.
Yeah.
And if
It's
you
not
if
as
you
fun.
do it, yeah, it's just not as fun and enjoyable. The only caveats I guess I'll say to that is like if you've given enough value, you can make a big ask every so often, especially if the audience already wants it. And then if you make that ask in a fun and entertaining way, then you have even more license to do it.
It's like
So like when we did,
that knee thing that you did. Like maybe you can explain
yeah,
that because people are probably like listening to this. Like, what the hell is he talking about?
yeah, well, yeah, that one was crazy. So I had seen this video, this viral video, but it's basically a tool for pavers, like people who lay bricks, to kneel down easily, and it basically creates like a right angle or a triangle to not have your knee hit the ground. Um, and so I bought the tool that day when I saw the video. I was like, I want to make a video about this for gardening and see what people think about it. And my idea in my head was like, okay, number one, it'll probably do well as a piece of content. I think it's fun and enjoyable for our audience. Number two, if it does that well, maybe we can talk to the manufacturer and get some custom ones made for the gardening market, because this was really more of a construction tool. And so it was kind of like a hybrid approach. Like number one, it should do well and the audience should gain value just from the content itself. Secondary effect would be if it does well enough, I can potentially make this into a product. It did so well though as a piece of content that we sold out of like the country sold out of all of them. Because I think in like 4 or 5 days, that piece of content did like 150 million views, which is just crazy. Like it's stupid. Like I was at a volleyball game that weekend, just watching the game, and the guy in front of me was watching that video. You know what I mean? It was just so weird. I've never had something go that viral, so I'd never had that experience before. But so that sort of in a way that succeeded and failed because we've never gotten to sell that product. It's it just sold out, and that was the demand wave, and so it didn't make sense to kind of chase that down. But it's an interesting example of how this content mixed with commercial stuff can work out.
Yeah. I mean, there's that saying that a lot of people in the tech world say, where it's like first time founders focus on product and second time founders focus on distribution. And you kind of figured it out beforehand. Like you built the
Yeah.
distribution as you were kind of building the product, which I think is the smartest way to go because then you have either a CAC of zero or a negative CAC, or you have returning
Negative
customers
CAC,
that
yeah.
you didn't even pay for, but they're coming back and like buying stuff every month. Um, I mean, on that point, what does like retention look like for customers in the gardening space? Once you have them in your wheelhouse, do they just keep buying for life? And how loyal
Well,
are
you
they to seeds or like, specific brands?
yeah, yeah. So it's hard because if you think about it, like I was saying, what the biggest categories in the gardening market is live plants, soils, fertilizers, and then maybe seeds. And there's tools and stuff, but think about how many of those recur. The live plants recur, soils and ferts to some degree do, fertilizers
Yep.
maybe more than soils, and then seeds definitely recur. Uh, and think about which one of those are easy to sell in direct to consumer channels. Literally only one, only seeds.
Seeds.
The rest of them, you pretty much need a wholesale relationship to make work.
Yeah.
And so there's really only one online recurring revenue category within the gardening market, which would be seeds. Which is why we are in seeds, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to sell someone, let's say, a raised bed, and then like keep trying to sell them raised beds forever.
Yeah.
Although people tend to taste their way into gardening, like they'll buy one and they'll buy two, then they'll buy four. At some point, your yard is full, though, you know.
Yeah. Sure.
And so I like seeds. First of all, it's literally the genesis of gardening, so it's very on mission. But number two, it's a lightweight, fantastic product to sell,
Easy to
and
ship.
people love to buy it, and they're also very brand loyal. To your question, when you like a seed brand, you like a seed brand, and you want to get their catalog and browse their catalog. So usually people have 2 to 3 seed brands that they really like, and they stick with those most of the time.
That's awesome. How do you spend like an average day today? Is it mixed up with, and I know you have days probably where you do content, other days where you do business stuff, but it's like an average day, an average Tuesday. How would you spend it?
An average Tuesday is a day like this then. So average Tuesday would be a mix of like pre-production, production on content, and yeah, pre and production, not post-production. So most of the time on Tuesdays, I'd be filming in the afternoons, and I'd be working on what I'm going to be filming in those mornings.
Yes.
So that's actually where I'm headed right after this, is to a team meeting on production operations, and then we're gonna go film later today. But each day is slightly different. Like Wednesday is mostly a calls and like administrative sort
Operations.
of one-to-one, team meetings, that kind of thing. Friday is a pure garden day, or as pure a garden day as I can get. And then Mondays is sort of like ideation, admin, product day. So each day kind of has a bit of a theme to it.
Do you feel like that works out better than trying to carve out like 3 hours each day to different, different buckets of work?
I'm still like playing around with it, but it works better than whatever I was doing before, where it was like
Whatever was the most
whatever was a
important thing at the
priority
time.
just happened at
Yeah.
the quickest possible time. Because the context switching was driving me crazy, because I'd have a day where I'd take a meeting with another company's founder or something like that to learn, and then like 2, 3 hiring calls, a one-to-one, and then film. And I'm like, this doesn't make my brain's in like 7 places today. It just wasn't working that well.
Yeah. Do you have, I mean, I'm assuming the answer is no, but do you have any interesting hobbies or obsessions that you do outside of gardening and work and running a company and managing a team
I'm
and everything?
trying to develop some. I really am trying to develop some because I don't think it's healthy to only be all in on your thing, especially when like your hobby became the business, right? So I'm
Yeah.
trying to develop another hobby that isn't this. And I think as the business got crazier and grew and stuff, a lot of the hobbies dropped away. Like I used to rock climb all the time, and I used to skateboard, or I was doing CrossFit with friends back in the day, and a lot of that stuff has unfortunately dropped away. So I'm trying to find something new.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's good to like fully separate work and play at least a few hours a week. I think I personally find I get some of my best ideas during that time.
Hmm.
If I'm either just like going on a hike with my dogs, I think of like really good content or just fun things to do. Versus if I'm always working, I'm kind of just like wearing my brain down. Um, Another question that I has like, do you ever deal with, I don't know, weirdos in person? I mean, you're such a public figure. You're an interesting because your production and the space where you record happens to be your home, and so you're kind of public in that sense too. But do you deal with people like coming up to you and if you're out and about at a restaurant or even at your house?
The house stuff has calmed down, thankfully. It was
Good.
crazier in the last couple years.
Yeah.
I've had people like walk into the backyard, like walk into the garden, drive by in very weird ways, and like clearly they're
Take
there
a
for that
picture or
reason,
whatever.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like scrubbed all that from the internet, so that's happening less, which is
That's great.
great. In public, people aren't really weird. They just say like, "Hey, what's up?" "Thanks for the videos," or whatever, which is cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of like I like getting those types of public interactions versus like if I was like a lifestyle creator, and they just are obsessed with you as the person. I
Exactly.
much rather someone be like thankful that I put out something valuable to them. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Like once you get to a certain scale, which is it's very unrelatable to talk about because very few people are at that scale, right? Um, you start to develop like weird um, biases. I guess I would say is like so. Like here's one that's just kind of weird. Like if I'm walking around anywhere really, but mostly like in America for sure, and someone stares at me for like over 2 seconds, I'm mentally prepping for something to happen,
Like
which would never
conversation
happen
or
in the past, right? Like it's never something that would happen in the past, but I've developed like a sixth sense now of who's there's like 3 categories, like just weird people that like to look at you, that's just normal. Then there's like the people who are too shy to say something, but you could tell by their demeanor that they know who you are, right? And then the third one is someone who's eventually going to say something to you. And I've thought about that. I was like, it's kind of weird that I've developed that sort of sense, you know? And it almost feels like egotistical in a way, but it's also just a reaction to what happens to you in life, you know?
yeah.
But yeah, most of the time it's a friendly thing. So
What what's your total audience size right now? Because at some point it's a law of large numbers. So, if you
yeah,
see 100
yeah.
people, one of them is likely to see you or like,
It's like 13 something million, I think.
yeah, it's pretty big.
If and then it's hard because like audience size is no longer really the metric, right? As you know, like
Reach,
it's
views,
more like what's yeah,
engagement.
what's your view share, your impression share even, like, if you've ever interacted with gardening in any way, you have seen my face at this point, right? And so someone will say like, "Oh, you're that guy a lot," or whatever, you know? So yeah, it's just I remember Mr. Beast said something, he had a very linear scale for it.
I
I don't
remember.
know if you ever saw that clip, right? He's like,
Yeah.
"At 1,000,000, this will happen. At 5,000,000, this will happen. At 10, this will happen. At 50, this will happen." And at his scale, he was like, "At my scale, I have to leave every place within a few minutes. Otherwise, the word gets out that I'm there, and then people will drive to it."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "That sounds like a nightmare," you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I think about a lot too, as somebody's like building quote unquote personal brand or just putting content online and putting my face out there. Um, like niche fame versus like for example, you said lifestyle fame, people who like I guess the Tim Ferrisses of the world, or even people who are not even business creators in general, and then people fall in love with the individual and then they get obsessive, like celebrities, I guess. Um, but yeah, like I guess how do you think about like the future of putting yourself out there online, and do you kind of worry about like, okay, well, if this keeps taking off, which it looks like it is, and eventually you reach like max capacity of hundreds of millions of people following you or knowing who you are, then does that, you know, interfere with your personal life or relationships and all that?
Yeah, I think it's probably there already.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, it is a very weird thing, and I think that anyone it's happened to understands how bizarre it can be, and the effects it can have. It's hard to like rewind the clock and remember what it was like before that at this point, you know? Um, I do try to like I don't think I like take it that seriously.
Yeah.
Because I remember like, okay, well, I was at the YouTube Creator Summit last year,
Cool.
the end of last year, with a bunch of other YouTubers, right? That, big in finance or lifestyle or whatever. And I had the same reaction that people would probably have to seeing me if they're fans of my videos, right? I'd be like, "Oh, there's Graham Stephan. Oh, there's who," and I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm on the other side." Like I was at Crate and Barrel a couple weeks ago with my girlfriend, and I saw a musician that I liked, and I was like, "Hey, are you this?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh man, I like your music," and I just walked away because I was like, "That's what I would want someone to do to me."
Right.
Um, but I was like, and then on the way out of Crate and Barrel, someone stopped me, right? So it was like very weird reverse scenario, and I remember thinking like, "Oh, I know they know me as little as I know that guy,
Mm.
right? His actual life."
Yeah.
And so the way I've tried to internalize it these days is like they don't know no one like knows you in the way that you think they do or they think they do.
Yeah.
They sort of know like a mirage or a presentation of who
Persona.
you are or what you're saying, right? Um, and that's all it is. It's a 2D image projected through a million different screens in a certain way that people tend seem to like, right? Depending on what the thing is. And so I try to keep that in mind, I guess, to not go as crazy about, thinking about all this stuff. Cause it is, I don't know, man, it's just a very weird feeling sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're in a generally good niche, like gardening. People are generally,
Yeah, it's a
excited that
family,
you're
right?
helping them. It's friendly
Yeah.
versus something else. As somebody, I've been observing like the trend of like homesteading like, over the past couple years, and seen it like climb steadily little by little. And even like prepping, like people like prepping for the end of the world or different situations. Do you have any general advice, like going 0 to 1 for growing a homestead, and being like as self-sufficient as possible? Like, where would you start?
Mm.
What would you build? Would you get chickens? Would you start off with vegetables? Um, and
I think you
assuming that they have like a
start
small house, a small, not a huge yard or anything like that.
like a suburban yard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Suburban yard. I mean, I would say it's hard to say like, hey, start with chickens or don't, or start with personally, I would start with fruit trees
Mm.
because number one, they take a while to actually get going. So the sooner you get them going, the better. But number two, like once they are going, I have like 15 citrus, for example, and I can't eat all of that, right? At this point, 4 years in, I can't eat all that citrus.
Mm.
Um, and so I would start with fruit trees, and then I would get into like whatever vegetables you enjoy eating the most, and that's the key. It's not like what's the easiest to grow. It's what are the ones you actually like to eat the most,
Yeah.
and which for me would be like tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, like kind of the basics, instead of getting into these esoteric things. Um, and then go from there. And if you want to eventually get chickens, you can, especially now. Like I don't know, I've all these egg memes. The chickens are
Dude, I went
look
to
pretty
Costco
better.
yesterday and there was a line of probably like 60, 70 people. Like it was halfway down Costco.
That's great,
Um,
just for the eggs.
just for the eggs. And everybody in
That's
line was like,
crazy.
it was people in Spanish were saying like, I need to get a damn chicken. Like this is crazy. I just started laughing. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I
You have
don't get.
chickens, right?
Well, yeah, I have chickens, and that's the thing is like I've had chickens for so long now. I'm disconnected from the
Buying
market
eggs.
dynamics of eggs. Like I don't relate to it now. And even though in winter we're not getting that many eggs for your chickens because they have a bit of a lull,
Mm.
but I'm getting like maybe 4 eggs a day now. That's
Oh,
fine.
that's all you need. You're not gonna eat
I don't
more
really
than
need
that.
more.
Yeah.
And then in summer I'll be getting probably 7 to 8 a day, and then I'm good to go, right? And so, yeah, I think chickens are very rewarding, especially like their symbiosis with the garden is really nice too.
Yeah. Anything else you'd build or you'd have?
I mean, I really like energy systems. So like I put 24 solar panels on the roof to help offset those costs. I changed up some of my water, like I did rainwater capture. But all these things in a suburban environment are maybe a little bit more extreme. Like you don't really need rainwater capture in a suburban environment. The further out you get, then yeah, the more that would be important. I would say like you could go a long way towards meaningfully reducing your grocery bill and then also like increasing the nutrition of what you're eating by just having like a nice vegetable garden and fruit trees.
Very cool. Nice. I saw that you were experimenting with the second YouTube channel. I don't know if you're like kind of public about this, but what's the thought there? And you're already busy as hell as it is, so like splitting time and energy and like
Mhm.
shifting between different. I think you're like doing personal branding and like just a bunch of different content themes over there. So like, how do you think about building that? Are you just experimenting just to see what happens?
It's just a place like if you're talking about my personal channel, it's just a place to put up
Yeah, that's
stuff
what it
that
was.
I need to get out because I like to make content. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
Um, That's it. The Epic world has 4 channels, and then this one, this is just my place. I was like, I need a place I don't talk about gardening, and I talk about whatever else I want.
Yeah.
I don't publish to it too often, so it's a true, like, whenever type channel, which is very relieving feeling instead of having to be on the schedule for everything. So, yeah, it's just kind of an outlet.
Yeah. I mean, there's a thesis that I've been kind of working on. It's one of the reasons why I'm, quitting my job and going all in on content is basically building an online presence is one of the highest leverage uses of your time, especially
Mhm.
as AI gets really good at like previously high skilled work. And I think you're one of the people who's like playing this in real life, building an online presence, being really helpful online, not being negative and being very specific within a niche, but also like showing your personality in a sense where you're not just like a talking monologue all the
Right,
time.
right.
So I think it's pretty fascinating to see like what you built, how you run your operation, the business, and everything that you do, while also like leveraging different social channels for like different parts of your personality. Like Twitter is different from YouTube, and
Mhm,
it's a little bit different from
mhm.
like IG, and you won't catch stuff on TikTok that you would find on LinkedIn. Um, so yeah, I guess, do you have any advice for like early creators or people who have like an inkling for like business, but they're also, want to start creating content and they understand that it's important?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, man, it's hard because now I'm like old in this space. So a lot of my advice that worked for me just simply either doesn't exist or would not work anymore.
Yeah.
But I guess if I was restarting, I would pick the platform I'm the most comfortable creating in, or the media format I guess I'm the most comfortable in. Is it audio, video, or text?
Mm.
And I would pick the dominant platform for whatever choice that was. And I'd go all in on that for a while until I kind of like built my sea legs on how to make for that particular format.
Yeah.
And then I would start to expand out from there and say like, okay, well, can I go to, say I picked text, right? And I picked X. Okay, cool. I'm doing well on X. Can I now translate that to LinkedIn? And it has to be a translation, as you know, right? You can't just repost. Um, because the audience profile is different, even if it's similar people following you, even their psychographics, your mind's different on
Exactly.
LinkedIn than it is on Twitter,
They're
right?
probably watching it. They're probably like scrolling LinkedIn at work versus Twitter. They're on their phone or like,
Mhm.
it's the mindset is
They
so
want
different.
something a little different.
Yeah.
And so I do that, and then, if you had the ambition to go multimedia, then I would start translating that stuff into the different formats of media. So I might do little audio bites, or I might do short form videos or this or that. But you don't really need to do all those to do well. It depends on what
Yeah.
your business is, right? Or what your goal is. Mine is we our company mission is we exist to help you grow. So we have to be in every media format that a gardener would ostensibly want to consume on. Otherwise, we're not fulfilling that. So that's why we're on everything. But a lot of businesses don't need that to survive and do well.
Yeah. Just a few more questions. I'll let you go. Are there any misconceptions about what you do? That people, I mean, the one that comes to mind for me is like, this is freaking awesome. Like you get to garden for a living. Um, but that's probably a misconception because there's a shit ton of work that goes into it because you have a business and your media empire as well. But any other misconceptions or even the one that I just said right now, is that true?
Yeah, I mean, ah, man, misconceptions. I think there's an interesting one. I'm curious if you agree, is like if you're a creator type, let's say you're in like a hobby category or even cooking or something like that, you actually have to be better at creating than you have to be at the hobby. You don't have to be that good at the hobby.
Yeah.
You actually have to be world class at the creating part of it, which is counterintuitive. And that's, I think, where you were mentioning, like, do people get angry or this or that? That's where you will tend to see people get frustrated with your content, is when they think they should have it. They should be at that level because they're like, maybe they're a better trained chef than some big YouTuber. And it's like, well, cool, but you're actually not better at the combination. And that's the important part. Um, and that's why, like with our brand, at least, I've told Jacques on my team, who's a creator of ours, as well as I tell myself, we never claim we're experts. We just sort of claim that we love to garden and we know a lot because this is all we do now, but we're not experts speaking to you from on high. We're just like fellow gardeners trying to learn and share what we've learned that's worked for us,
Yeah.
which helps stave off kind of some of that behavior. But yeah, I
Because
don't know.
otherwise you
It's
get a lot of
interesting.
haters in the comments saying like, "That's he did it wrong," or "He put the seed too low," or like, that
Not
those
really, not that often. I'm pretty proud of like the way we
great.
put information out. Most we make mistakes here and there for sure, but like we're pretty good. And we'll hear that feedback from nursery trades people. They're like, "Yeah, we like your videos because they're the most accurate or whatever," which is great to hear. Um, but you will see that sometimes, you know? I don't know. I just think it's a creator misconception in general. It's like you actually have to be better at the art of creating than whatever you're creating about
I
to be
agree.
seen, you know?
Yeah. And on top of the creation aspect, you also kind of have to be a little bit of a growth hacker and understand how these platforms work. Like you said, how to optimize for each one and um, how to play the game, I guess, which is kind of annoying sometimes, but that's the way
Mhm.
it is.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's where you see, like, creators get hard stuck at smaller account levels, and then
yep.
they go into, like, cope mode where they're like, "Well, I'm not the type to wanna do that to grow," and it's like, "Okay, well, then you won't grow, but you also
Yeah.
can't complain about not growing." So, like, you've made a moral choice, I guess, to not make short form video, let's say.
Yep.
I've seen this happen actually a couple times, like, in our space, like, people will be like, I don't make those little stupid little videos that are dancing and this and that." I'm like, well, first of all, you're bastardizing the format. There's a lot of ways you can make these videos. But second of all, you're just making a cope for why you're not growing, and you're saying that's the only reason why. It's like, no, it's you maybe you're just not that good at it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like
Exactly.
maybe you're just not that good.
Or just hire somebody to do it for you that's great at content. And you do be the talent.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. So it's interesting to see creators kind of get it was the second someone gets mad at the algo, you know they're kind of cooked, is my
Yeah.
opinion. That's when you know they're done.
Done.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay, so the past 10 years, you kind of built this gardening empire. What do the next 5 to 10 years look like for you? I mean, 10 years is kind of far out, but the next couple of years,
Yeah.
anything that you're kind of interested in working on or, aspirations that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get more space to grow. I'd love
Oh, like
to
physical space, like land.
physical space. Yeah. Yeah, because there's so much that the story could continue in such a grander way if I could have more space
Yeah.
and a new story to tell. Because like the homestead I'm at now, it's pretty much built out. Like I'll always be able to improve it and
Yeah.
refine it, but a lot of the big projects are done here, and I'd love to, own a nursery one day under the Epic
Just
name.
to give people like a sense, like how is a quarter acre, like half an
Yeah, it's
acre?
a third of
What
an
do you,
acre.
oh,
Yeah,
okay. Not
third.
bad.
So it's not super big, but for SoCal, it's pretty big to have like a suburban lot that's
Yeah.
13,000 square feet. Um, but yeah, it'd be nice to have a like a headquarters, right? Like an Epic headquarters, which is maybe a retail space and some experimental gardening space would be cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, more product development to be done, and then building out the content network. So launching a few more podcasts and hopefully having some creators on the team that can carry carry channels on their own.
Yeah.
So I'm not on them all the time. Uh, would be nice because eventually you have to think about that.
Yeah. Do you find that that gets exhausting? Because in a way, you kind of are the bottleneck for a lot of the content, especially if it's video content.
Yeah.
Um, do you
Yeah. I
like?
mean, I think
Yeah.
the hard part is you have to start swapping yourself out at different parts of the process. So, like, obviously, editing, I don't do editing anymore.
Yeah.
But like video ideation, thumbnails, titles, usually most of the structure of the videos, post production notes, etc. I'm still pretty involved in, And so I'm trying to figure out ways to escape some of those without losing the results, right? And
Yeah.
that's the hard part. I would accept like a slight loss, but not like a, not like a total loss. So I'm trying to crack that.
I mean, I know you've listened to some Mr. Beast videos, but he talks about having like I forgot what he calls it, but it's like a duplicate or like a mini me. Have somebody follow him all the way around, like always, all the time, so that they can kind of be in Jimmy's brain of like, what would Jimmy do? And then to the best of their ability, like they kind of
It's smart.
execute.
Yeah.
Um, and so you could kind of do that. But again, it's kind of hard having somebody always watching what you do and picking up like the osmosis.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, my creator Jacques on our team, he's awesome. He quit a PhD in geology after being my gardening assistant for a while, and now he's a creator. He's got like maybe he's close to 1 million combined across all of his platforms. And
That's great.
yeah, I mean, he picked up all the content stuff totally osmosis through just observing and doing and trying. And he runs his channel like he comes up with everything on his own, shoots it, and our team edits it and puts it up. And so, yeah, he's the closest, but it's hard because like it's almost a catch-22 in gardening. Like you need different geographies and different climates and different use cases. But the easiest way to teach is if someone's there next to you watching you make the content, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, I need someone in New York, but I have to teach them from afar, so it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, I know we're at time, but you just kind of made me think of another question. So you have these creators that you're building out on your team. How does it work? Like, do you pay them to create content for the business, but then they also fully own their own audience and their own brand? Or yeah,
It depends. So in the case of Jacques, I developed the channel. I sort of pitched him. I was like, hey, I would love to do a channel with you because you have a different approach, and so Epic, we own the YouTube channel, and Jacques on the team. Jacques actually is a pretty core member of our team. Like he's doing video stuff, he's doing content research, but he's also doing product design and testing stuff, and product feedback,
yep,
seed selection ideas. So he's very integrated part of the team.
it's great.
Other folks that show up on video, um, we typically do like kind of like a talent host sort of model, and
Yeah,
we've
good.
played around with a lot of different models. I've hired people like full time and then not owned any of the content that they produced, and
I
that
think that's
didn't
smart.
work very well. So yeah,
Well,
I
especially
think
if you
I
think
had
about
so
like
many different
YouTube
ways.
content, like it,
Yeah, it's hard, man,
that
because
gets
like
keeps on getting, over time.
yeah, the creator is good because they have that relationship with their audience, and typically they're not super motivated by like some big contract or whatever. Um, and so a lot of times, especially in gardening, it's like it's hard to get someone to want to join because they're
Mm,
happy making videos in their backyard, making an extra 15K a year plus whatever they do else. So it's
yep,
like it's kind of hard to persuade them.
yeah. Thanks, man. Well, is there anything else we didn't cover that you would want to, highlight before we drop?
No, I think this is a good pod, dude.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's
you.
good finally like chatting with you face to face too. So if you're ever up in, or I guess I'll hit you up after. So if you want to come visit, or if I'm ever in San Diego, I'll hit you up.
Oh yeah, yeah, that'd be great.
All right, dude. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.